What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
Our back in action Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We help each other make progress towards our goals. Mr. Ray, what's going on, buddy?
I'm good, Wes. Busy week. Canada Day, July 4th. A lot going on. A lot of art, transactions, and opening receptions and whatnot. So busy, happy, joyous, and free. How about you?
What goes on in Canada during July 4th? Does anything? I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant.
No. So Canada Day is July 1st. So it's just within a few days of July 4th. And it's much the same. It's like flag waving, fireworks. And then if you bump into someone, you say, sorry. A lot of sorry.
Yeah.
Right? So much the same.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, man, it's over here. My life has been going pretty crazy in a good way. We're scaling the business and actually onboarding some pretty intense projects. And luckily we've got, I think, 12 people now. We've got a few interns. So week to week, it tends to vary. But it's been good. It's been a good, sort of exercise in growing, which I try to participate quite frequently. And this one is really testing my skill, which is good.
Yeah, I've got a new intern as well. This young lady, 22 years old, I think, just graduated from St. Andrews University in Scotland with a degree in art history. And in the fall is going to Oxford to do a master's in art history, which is pretty impressive. And so just worked with her for 2 days this week. So she's well versed on the academic side, but not really in the market side. So that's where I can add value. And I'm learning a lot from her, just from because I've been out of academia for 20 years now, almost. So it's refreshing to have that perspective again in circulation.
Yeah, let me ask you this now. Having gone through so many repetitions, and you pick, let's say, business or other areas of your life. I read a great quote yesterday, which was get in the habit of asking yourself, does this support the life I'm trying to create? Is there any pruning that you have to do? And I would ask the guys the same thing, right? Is there any pruning that you have to do in your life? And also knowing that pruning is an essential part of growing, which I don't think was really talked about a lot. It's, you have to grow, and you are going to grow in certain ways that you have to cut back on. But those two things are, cannot be divorced, right? Thinking that you're only going to grow the leaves that are to stay on the tree or the plant forever, I think is an erroneous thought. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Why don't you define pruning for us?
Yeah. So for instance, I know in the business that, let's say, 4 out of 6 projects will have to be cut. But I'm doing it because I know that the 2 out of the 6 projects will be really profound to grow the entity. Same thing in life. I know that, maybe 4 out of the 6 books that I start reading, I'm going to have to stop because it's not worth the time. After I get to chapter 3, okay, this doesn't have the substance that I need. So thinking that we're just going to have to grow in one direction without pruning back on anything that we've committed to, I think is a foolish thought.
Of your 6 girlfriends, are you going to prune back to 2?
Yeah, I'm just trying to decide which ones. Yeah,
that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. Yeah, growth. It's an interesting idea because why do we have to grow? Right? Like, why? If growth is painful, and right, and we're kind of like biologically programmed to avoid pain, why do we have to grow?
Yeah, I think because the thing, specifically the people around you, you have to maintain some sort of symbiotic relationship with. So I think that's one major reason. And if they're growing, or if you don't not feel like you are in the pack and earning your keep, then that's a problem. Which this obviously gets back to the denominator of like, is your group growing? And if not, that might be an easier life temporarily. But this is the classic, 75-year-old that never left the small town and regrets it, every Tuesday at the local watering hole. I should have done this. I should have left. I should have blah, blah, blah. So I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Not at all. It's way deeper than that. It's like, it's like, I'm thinking like, is there something about our condition as human beings that if we don't grow, we regress? Right? Like, like
the law of atrophy.
No, define the law of atrophy for us.
Yeah, just basically that, things are in constant decay, especially in absence of maintenance or growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose you can't just, you can't go to the gym for 2 weeks every day, get those muscles, and then just enjoy those muscles for the rest of your life, right? And I suppose the same thing is true for our brains, right? Where we have to always be learning, or there's some kind of rot that sets in. And I think that, the same, it's probably true of it's probably true of everything, right? Spiritually, in our interdependent relationships, and in the work that we do, where we should always be seeking growth, not because, not because we're never good enough. It's just that, like you said, because of the law of atrophy, it's that if we stop, we actually shrink or we decay, rather than just staying in this static kind of bronze medal or silver medal kind of state.
Yeah, and I think the idea of pruning in particular is very rarely talked about, because it's not as concrete as like grow or don't grow. And it also gives the illusion of giving up or losing. It's like, okay, you're either growing or you're not, but that's not really true. It's like you are attempting to grow or not. And the attempting part is really important, because honestly, if you're not trying a certain amount of things, then you're just not really trying. But you have to try a critical mass of things, and knowing that, hey, I'm going to have to stop these certain things over here. And that's the hard part. Like, what's the scripting around it? What's the mindset around it? How do you do that with empathy towards yourself and towards others? It's a conversation that's very rarely had, but I can tell you all the successful people that I know, they are really good at pruning, really good at growing and pruning. Interesting.
And it's like, I'm reminded of what Andrew spoke about a couple of weeks ago, which is the dark playground. So, that comes to mind, like if we stop trying to grow and if we stop pruning, we are staying in our comfort zone, which sounds nice, right? Comfort. But the comfort zone pretty quickly turns into the dark playground, right? Where we're just avoiding all the no's, just surrounding ourselves by yeses, surrounding ourselves by pleasure, and comfort, rather than getting out there into the thorns and the bramble, and pushing the limits in the path. Yeah, the path of progress has a lot of thorny brambles on either side, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So let me ask you this: is there anything in your life that you think you've got to prune?
All of it, man.
Yeah.
Man, I need landscaping, manscaping, definitely. Yeah. Like I can't think of, and this, like, the summer, I'm thinking about the summer. I'm thinking about September and how, like, what can, I'm not postponing the change till September, but I'm thinking about, like, what can I do over the next 2 months so that I'm just like roaring, I'm just going at top speed in September. What can I accelerate? And so, like, the pruning, I'm thinking of, like, my efforts. I'm thinking of my clients. I'm thinking of, really, it's like the habits, right? So I think it starts with, like, what things am I doing on the daily that, and what things am I not doing on the daily? It comes back to the scorecard. It comes back to habits, and there's all kinds of behaviors that I can think of that are, that need to be pruned back. Like, for example, I'm obsessed with the European soccer championships, the Euro Cup. Thank God there's only a week left and only a handful of games. But that is something, like, I definitely do not need to replace. And then I'm thinking, like, the Stanley Cup finals of the NHL were just before this, and the NBA finals. And so I'm sure the powers that be have another sports tournament for me to sit down and, like, couch potato, right? Like, right after the Euro's done. So I've got to be really vigilant that, like, there's 4 more games to watch. And then so that's something that I'm definitely going to prune. And you can hold me accountable to that.
Isn't it amazing the amount of distraction that the world offers?
Oh, it's endless. The world is a dark playground. The world is our dark playground, Wes.
Yeah. I remember in college, I was actually in an art history class, and the professor, I think, was talking about the Roman Colosseum. And at least from what he said, I believe he said it was created essentially to keep the people distracted enough to where they didn't cause an uprising.
Right. The expression "bread in circuses," right, I think is what
I'm
you're
not familiar with
to.
it. Teach it to me.
So the Romans, I think that's what I think along the same thought pattern, or part of that same lesson in art history or in history, was the expression, like, give the people bread in circuses. Right. So this Roman leader, or whoever is attributed this quote, he's like, give them the Colosseum, entertainment, and give them a loaf of bread, and that's their dark playground. And then, like, they won't make a peep,
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, like, I also think of what Vladimir Lenin said, like, religion is the opiate of the masses. Right. So that's, like, another version of that the kind of the founder of, 20th century communism, Kevin's role model. He said religion is the opiate of the masses. And so for Lenin, who wanted to create a kind of totalitarian state / workers' paradise, right? He saw religion as the great distraction that was preventing the people from, like, rising up and getting what they deserved.
What do you think are the modern day versions of
porn? Comes to mind for sure. Give the people porn and sports. Like, it's not as poetic as bread and circuses, but it's no. So, like, porn comes to mind. So I just have to, like, I have to look at my scorecard and think of what are the opposites, right?
Right.
So what prevents me from getting enough sleep? And that's probably, like, YouTube, or, like, being up on my phone at night, right? What prevents me from drinking water And when I say drink water, maybe I think of drink water and eat healthy, and that's junk food and how it's marketed to us. What prevents me from doing my act of love? And again, distractions. So I would say kind of online distractions again. Whether things that keep us isolated, right? Whether that's entertainment, like video games, online, movies. What prevents me from, reviewing my goals, my learning segment, my meditation, my movement. These are all the things. These are all the bread and circuses, right?
And then which do you think you have problems with the most?
I think it's just like, to be honest, it's like, entertainment. So for me, it's distracting podcasts. Really. It's as niche as comedy podcasts. Comedy podcasts are destroying America, Wes. They're destroying America.
Yeah.
They're frying our brains.
It is an enormous tsunami.
You know it, dude. You know it. Like, you know how comedians like Matt speak to us and speak for us, and they're almost like our they make public our deepest, darkest, weirdest thoughts and make it okay, right? When Matt jokes about all the weird shit he thinks about, it's a cancer. We got to cut it out. It's a cancer we need to surgically remove from America.
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, when you say it's like the religion's the opiates of the masses, and you look at social media right now, I mean, to think about the amount of goals and dreams that were given up on because of distraction, and then defended as something else. Oh, it's just not meant for me. That's just marketing, or, good for he got lucky, all that stuff, when it really was like, no, you just got distracted every single day.
Yeah. So Wes, in terms of like growth and pruning, I got to give myself some credit. We talked about how like the mainstream media, or just news in general, like the consumption of news, right? The he said, she said, gotcha journalism, all that is such a distraction. We've been talking about that since day one. And I have pruned that, I never watch the news. I get my information, like if the information is urgent enough, I get it from kind of reliable sources, and or chances are, like, who won the British election? Who won the whatever, what this governor or congressman said, like, that is not germane to my journey. So that's something that I pruned out of my life. And and so I think, and the peace of mind and is incalculable. The improvement in peace of mind from not having news. For example, my wife went down to Florida to visit her mom, right? And her mom watches Fox News all day.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Here's a text. Here's a text her mom sent her. This is your news brain. Please come home. Something is wrong. I'm afraid something's either going on with this hurricane or the Russians and Chinese fooling around with our satellites. They know Joe Biden is useless and America is on the defensive. God knows who's running things. Come home now. Oh. Get an Uber. We're scared and worried for you. And there's a little more. But anyway, so that's your news brain.
Yep.
In action, right? That is distraction gone mad. I got no problem with this person. That was me. That was me back when I was consuming hours and hours of news a day, checking my phone constantly, the New York Times, seeing what the headlines are, just being fed this this kind of steady diet of distraction, this IV of distraction, right? And you're right. I need I don't want to prune anything, Wes. Like, I don't want to like rub the fog off the mirror and take a good look at myself. I don't. That sounds like a painful process, right? Like, because you're not asking me to just prune away the bad behavior, right? You're asking me to actually replace it with good behavior, I presume.
Yes.
Right. And Daddy doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think
that's outside my comfort zone. That is outside the dark playground. You're asking me to go back, like to leave the dark playground, right?
Yeah. And I think there's an element of like, we all know if we've ever tried anything that actually what I'm asking you to do is like to voluntarily enter into what I call the dead space, which is this space in time where there's an extreme lag from your efforts and the rewards. So it's like on one side of the ledger is this very quick hit, immediate dopamine, distracted, but pleasurable life. And then an invitation into, how about you do this thing for the next 6 months and not get any results or barely get any results, and then do it for another 6 months. And then maybe you'll get results.
Yeah.
You know,
something comes
but
up
after
for me,
a certain, please.
Relying on my assistant to do the parts of my job that I don't like. So, whether that's the social media, whether that's creating the newsletters, replying to emails, the scenario, the cliche that when you have an assistant, it frees up your time because they get to do all the stuff you don't like to do, right? Well, I found that if we're going to be perfectly honest, that has enabled me to hang out in the dark playground a lot longer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And because I am not growing, like I'm not growing as an entrepreneur. I'm not refining and I'm not like critiquing those communications she's doing, right, and improving them, and like, do you know what I mean? I'm just like that just means having an assistant for me means I get to spend more time on the beach, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And I know in your business you've talked about like there's a certain amount of work that your team does that that you also wonder if you need to take on more of that.
Take on more of what in particular?
Well, the like we have. Let's see. We've talked about you know how like moving clients from the old model to the new model, for example.
Yeah.
Your team is involved in a certain amount of that, and I'm just like, it just sounds to me like a similar version of what I'm talking about. Not that you're spending time on the beach, but it's like you have to chop some of that wood.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the pattern that you're hitting on here, this dream is sold in business all the time. Like, I'll build this machine so that it'll just feed you and your entitled children for the rest of eternity. But I think it's more of build the machine so that you can then be the pioneer to then expand the machine. Like, that's your job, in my opinion, right? And my job in the business. How can I expand the circumference of the zone of the business so that the team can then backfill it, if that makes sense? Not, okay, how do I just stop working for the rest of my life? Because if we just take that to its natural conclusion, we already know. This circles back to the first part of the conversation of, so what are you then just going to go into the distraction zone, into the dark playground, as you're calling it? What's the plan there? Like, all humans, especially men, in my opinion, must be providing value for their entire lives. And yes, it's important to have a certain ratio of rest to value creation, of course. But let's be honest, we don't have to help the rest part, for most people, right?
No, we managed to prioritize that and get that done first.
Right. So that's the thing that we have to fight against. Mm-hmm. So man, if more men just adopted the sense of urgency and obligation of I have to create value for other people, and I have to do that to the best of my ability because I don't want to sit with, in my opinion, the worst emotion created for man, which is regret, in my opinion. Well, like the only games worth playing are the games in which you transfer value to another human. I mean, and we all know that, in my opinion.
Yeah, hell yeah. And the other thing is too that like, if I'm going to be honest about my growth, assessing my growth, like having an assistant really, I mean, shouldn't that mean I create the space and bandwidth to do the even harder work? Right.
Yes,
which
exactly.
Again is outside the comfort zone. It's outside the dark playground. And if I'm going to be perfectly honest, yeah, I have not done that, or that's yeah. So I don't know, and I don't know what and so the image of pruning doesn't come to mind, but the image of planting, I guess. Right.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the job of a leader is to be a pioneer, and as we all know, like that common phrase of like pioneers get arrows in their back. So it's not a very glorious job, but what I can tell you is pioneers get the majority of the rewards. So I think it is very logical in the end. It's just making a decision of actually like, is the, are the arrows in the back worth the rewards? And in my particular opinion, the answer is always yes. So I think how often are we not only doing that in business, how often are we doing it in life where we offload a certain amount of work to others and completely drop our own workload or lighten our own workload? And in my opinion, that is like, we know how that story ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The train, the train falls off the track, the plane crashes into the mountain, the car drifts off the highway.
Yeah, and your skills atrophy, or even, hey man, like how sad is it to see an old infant, a father who can't solve problems that other men can solve for their own children or for their wives? I mean, how sad is that picture?
Dude, it's brutal. It's brutal, dude. Dude, it's really, it's like I think Wes, let's be honest, like, as we pursue like holistic excellence, there are areas there for all of us where other men are better, right? And I'm sure for you, like being the competitive person that you are, it must drive you crazy. Or does it? Does it?
Yeah.
When someone has
without doubt,
more of those skills than you do?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like, but that's the thing.
Like the guy who's picking out all the ripe fruit in the supermarket, and you're there just like grabbing a bag, and you're like, God damn, I'm so.
Yeah, he's just waiting for the opportunity for like the tire to pop, so you can like pull out his like pit crew style shield. Yeah, yeah. So this is where I think using the mental model of like create your ultimate competitor, and then just be that person. I think is a really quick and easy way of doing it. It's like, if who would I be scared to fight, or who would I be scared to compete against in whatever domain, and then just cherry pick the attributes that make that competitor that guy, and then become that guy. But it's taking yourself to a place where you're emotionally convinced of it is the trick, and I think that's hard for most people, because the low hanging fruit is I'd rather watch whatever you said about soccer earlier, whatever tournament is going on in soccer right now.
It's all right. It's probably the most widely watched televised event on earth right now, but you can call it that whatever thing you do. I mean, if that's how you want to describe it, that's fine. Yeah. That's my bread and circuses right now. And so like, I guess we should think about where in life are like the emperor isn't interested in bread and circuses, right?
Right.
The gladiator in the arena isn't interested in bread and circuses, right? It's the people in the stands. It's the people in the upper deck, right? And so So I have to ask myself, like, yeah, what areas of my life am I just doing the bread and circuses? For example, like there's a soccer ball out in the driveway gathering dust, right? Am I going to kick the soccer ball around with my daughter? It's a beautiful day outside. Or am I just going to sit and watch other fit people kick the soccer ball around, right?
Watch other men. Yeah. Yeah. Watch other men actually move the needle for their families. Yep.
Okay. Could you have to, can we not?
No, but seriously, man, I mean, I grew up in an environment, and I say this respectfully, where it's like, I know what it's like. And I'm saying this in case any other men are listening to this who can relate. I know what it's like to go out and try certain things and to have those around you say, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? But if we were to really fill in the narrative, it's like their judgment or their implied judgment, and oftentimes looking out for me, right, came from a place of empathy. Like, dude, you're wasting your time. Oh, you paid that amount of money for that course, or you did that. You went to that seminar thing, right? Why would you do that? You're working for free. Why would you, like, all of these things? Why would you? Why would you? And the reality is the equation was pretty simple. It's like, well, what should I do? Should I watch NFL football for 7 hours every Sunday and then go to Friday Night Lights, high school football on every Friday night, and then watch college football every Saturday? Is that what I should do with my free time? And then parlay that into the next sports season. I don't know. Seems kind of crazy to me. But you have to get through that dead zone that we were talking about earlier, because there's a whole bunch of time that you have to spend there and not get any results, and have your friends and family reinforce that narrative. It's like, oh, I see. I told you, right? Like, yeah, you went to that seminar 5 weeks ago. Why are you not rich yet, bro? Like, I told you that stuff doesn't work. So, and that's the real texture of these things, right? That's the stuff we have to fight against. So not only do you have to fight against the non-results that you are inevitably going to receive for a long time, so you're not going to get any results. And then you have to fight against the people who are trying to support you and bring you back to the old way of life or their way of life. And it's a very hard game. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and what comes to mind is maybe like when I'm thinking of the dark playground, I'm alone in the dark playground, right? Because like isolation is, I think, one of like the cancers, right? That like kind of enables a lot of this bad behavior that I do. And but maybe even maybe there are people in the dark playground with me, right? The kind of like the people who don't stimulate growth in me, right? It's like maybe like sometimes the dark playground is you're alone, but sometimes that's a team, right? And you're a part of, and like and you are a part of that team, and the qualities or negative attributes in this case, kind of attached to you. And so what's on the other side of that dead zone?
The same patterns. I have found, I wish I had a better narrative than this. I mean, number one, the rewards. I mean, let's be very clear about that. But then number two, it's going to be the same set of patterns, just at the next level. No different than a video game. Like once you beat that level, now you go to the next level. It's going to be a very similar narrative. You get to enjoy those brief punctuation marks, those brief moments of a trophy. And then you realize, oh, now I have to do it at this level. Now I have to do it at this socioeconomic level. Now I have to do it at this whatever competitive level. And it's the cool thing is it's the same thing. It's the same patterns. It's rinse and repeat. I have had the experience of, if you start from the bottom, it gives you a certain amount of grit that you then can take into the next level, if that makes sense. So this is why I always recommend people starting from the bottom, because like there's a certain amount of guerrilla warfare that happens at that level that you can bring to the fifth level. And it's that grit that can make you unique. Like if you think about, I'm trying to think of like an easy example of this. I'm imagining in my head probably a 50 Cent experience this type of pattern. Do you know what I mean? Like he can take what he learned at, in the streets of wherever he grew up in New York, and then apply that now to, right, the whatever business world he is in. So for some reason, that's the first thing that came to my mind. But skipping levels, I think, is oftentimes what we want to do. Our biology wants to do, but I think skipping levels is actually the worst thing you could do, because then you miss the education.
I was about to ask you, what are some like life hacks that we could do to to get us out of the for example, I was thinking if to be like a real sales ninja, or to be in a routine of going to the gym, 3 times a week or whatever, and whatever, in this growth mindset, and in peak performance mode by September, where should I start? What are the and so maybe I'm not asking to fast forward or skip a level, but what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think Isaiah is hitting it spot on in the comments. He said, skipping grades, maybe better off education wise, but now you're socially stunted. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a great question. Hey, where should I start? My answer is always going to be start at the bottom. I mean, really, right? And actually there's this great scene in Peaky Blinders where Tommy Shelby, the leader of the family and of that city, basically at one point goes back to the horse stalls and is shoveling horse manure. And the worker in there says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "Hey, I'm, just basically going back here to remind myself of the life that I don't want to go back to." So I think number one, start from the bottom. I think number two, on occasion, you have to revisit the bottom because you might forget some of the lessons that you learned along the way. Ray, I mean, in terms of, let's say, in sales, the best people in sales are the people who started at the cold asks. It's like if you skip the door knocking phase, if you skip the cold calling phase, then that is a skill gap, and it's an emotional gap that will bite you at some point in the future part of the journey. Do you know what I mean? And you can map that same exact thing into your health and fitness. You can map that same exact thing into relationships. You can map it over all domains of life. If there's any levels that you skipped, then you didn't get the fundamentals from that particular level. This is why it sucks to be born into a rich family, in my opinion.
Because you're born into an environment of virtually every skills gap.
100%.
Right. Yeah. With the exception of interacting with rich people, that's that you learn that language. I'm just objectively, that's a language. There's certain native language that you're born in. The native language fluency, which is what fork to use.
Yeah, and it's definitely not. Yeah, it's definitely not. As binary as maybe I was implying. There's pros and cons, right? But right, if you were to ask me, right, I want to be able to look at the back of my life and look at a rags to riches story, and I think if that were robbed from me, I think for me at least, any other version of a story would just be less motivating to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of true more broadly in our time and place where we're so blessed, right? To be born in either Canada or the US or wherever, in this time where so many of our basic needs are taken care of. We have to manufacture. A lot of us have to manufacture that starting at the bottom. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
we're born into such a comfortable environment that skills gap is a built-in risk.
Right. Think about, so I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the Bronny James and LeBron James draft, so Bronny James, LeBron James' son, just got drafted from my understanding. And I know very little about this situation. I just know from what people have told me. I'm going to imagine one of the things that Bronny James is going to have to fight against is the narrative that if my dad were not LeBron James, would I have gotten here? And I'm going to imagine that probably drives the Donald Trumps of the world crazy, right? Like, hey, I was gifted this amount of thing, but what the world doesn't know is I would have made it anyway. And the thing is, like, we don't know if that's true. And that would crush me inside. Do you know what I mean? Like with my personal DNA, I would just absolutely despise if there was like that unsolvable problem that I would never be able to shake that narrative. People were like, oh yeah, but he was given $250 million of real estate to start off with. Like, how hard is it to go from there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I suppose and so on a micro level or macro level, whichever one, like, we are born, a lot of us, most of us in this country are born with a bundle of entitlements, right?
Yes.
And so how do you end up like, how do you avoid being like an entitled type of person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have found yourself in that situation, how do you undo that, clear away the wreckage of a life built around pleasure and start building a proper foundation? And I think you answered that, which is start at the bottom.
Yeah, I think you burn it down, man. I know that sounds right. That might sound harsh, but it's really hard to be motivated when you're waking up in silk sheets every day and you haven't earned them. So my vote is like, you remove the silk sheets. I do think that most people don't want to do that though, right? It's like, hey, if you really want to tap into a real sense of motivation, like stop living off of the subsidies. And then obviously the next part of that conversation is like, okay, well, have you gotten rid of the subsidies? And the answer is almost always no. It's almost always no, right? Like, no, I haven't. It's like, well, then like that's why you're not motivated.
Get right on that.
You don't have to be.
Yeah.
So what people are really trying to do is they're trying to synthetically
have their cake and eat it too, right?
100%.
They're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I can wake up in the silk sheets and I can still grow the business.
I don't fault those people, Wes. Like, I get it, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And especially like, I know I have a few friends in this particular case where those subsidies also support their children. And that's hard, right? So like, whether it be, let's say at the wealthy level, right? Like it's usually some sort of inheritance, right? It's not a subsidy from the government, but it's like, oh, we're living off of mom and dad's or grandma and grandpa's, right, nest egg that they passed us upon their passing. So it's very easy to kick the can down the road when you have a few mil or more than that you can live off of. But I have seen this many times where there's a burn rate to that, and the runway is running out faster than was originally projected on their wealth management plan, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But they're not doing anything about it. It's like, okay, do you know what it's like to be broke when you're 60? Right? You're wealthy now, right, according to most people's standards. But do you know what that's like to be broke when you're 60? Do you know what the job market looks like when you're 60? Do you know what the prospect or the probability of you starting a business when you're 60? But that's hard to bring that pain into the present.
Why do I always feel like you're talking directly to me? I can relate to that. Like, first of all, I know people who are born into multi-generational inherited wealth. And it's not just the issue that the money's running out. The issue is that it feels like a meaningless life. Drugs and alcohol seem to be the only thing that can comfort them. And there are also examples in their families that I'm not super close with who still were able to ignite that kind of hunger and go out and make their own name, make their own living. even though they were born on the 99th floor of the skyscraper, like some of them have turned that into a hustle.
Absolutely. And I give so much credit to those people, because think about how motivated you have to be for your motivation to pierce the veil of the baseline resources, right? Like
infinite infinite resources. Yeah.
Yep. 100%. That is amazing. Like, and I give a lot of credit to people like that.
And for me, like marrying rich 20 years ago, I think it definitely, kind of extinguished, or it inevitably extinguished a sense of urgency, right?
Of course it did.
So I'm going to challenge myself. And more recently, like, as my marital status has evolved, like, I have had to, burn it all down, or it is burning down, or whatever. I mean, I guess there's a blessing that I'm presented with the opportunity to be that man that I want to be, right? That hungry, motivated, like luckily, like my resources are coming down to a level that I can like pierce through and get after it.
Yeah. The challenge oftentimes in people in that situation is the burn rate. It's almost like, like the burn rate almost has to, like, and the burn percentage almost has to get to 100% before somebody moves. So like, as your friend, I will push you. It's like, get that to a place mentally where you believe it, your biology believes that it's gone, so that way you can act from such a sense of fear. In my opinion, I know it doesn't sound glamorous, but like such a sense of fear that the pain of the complete devastation and failure and starvation, right, is more than the pain of making the next phone call.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Especially when that soccer thing's going on.
Dude, luckily I got up and paused it so I can play it. And so pruning is a way, I guess pruning is part of that, creating that sense of urgency, right? Pruning 100%. Away the distractions, pruning away the comforts, right?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. And then pruning on the offensive side as well. So yes, pruning on the defensive side, the things that are obvious, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's easy. It's pruning on the offensive. Okay, I'm going to have the guts to go and try these 10 things, knowing that 9 of them are not going to work. And I got to be able to step up as a leader and cut those as soon as I recognize they don't work. And I'll stick with the one thing that produces the disproportionate results. And then, you know what? I do it again. I do the next batch of 10, the next batch of 10, next batch of 10. I mean, Kyle right now is on this. Kyle's experienced this with me many times. They're like, hey, we're going to go and try these things. I'm going to suck at them. And then eventually I'm going to do them. And then, hey, we're going to cut off and we're going to pivot over here. And he's been such a great addition to the team because he's able to be agile with me and pivot according to like what we need at that moment. But right, like, it's not fun sometimes. It's not what the movies tell you oftentimes, if not all the time. But pruning is an essential part of growth. And I just wanted to bring that topic up to everybody, because if you are trying to go on the path of progress, you will have to prune things on the offensive side of the ledger as well as the defensive side of the ledger.
And people too, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the hard part, right? Mm-hmm. And people are involved in direct ways as well as indirect ways in that, right? Yes, sometimes you have to actually prune relationships, which I think is what you're referring to, Ray. And almost all other times, pruning involves you telling other people that you're pruning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that you're discarding them.
Well, and not only if you're discarding them, if you're discarding the thing that you were so enthusiastic about last week, right? Or last month or last year. And now you have to go with your tail between your legs and say, oh yeah, that thing didn't work. That thing that I was so convinced of didn't work. So now you get the indirect, right, like radiation from those around you who are going to judge you. It's like, see, this is why you should have watched the soccer thing with us. You missed out on the soccer thing when you wanted to try that business thing. Told you, dude, right? Don't make that same mistake next year. So yeah, pruning has an indirect negative consequence as well, oftentimes with our peers.
Yeah, so I like the idea of pruning, which is like discarding things that aren't working for you, abandoning things that aren't working for you, scrapping things that aren't working for you. And maybe planting is the trying the new things, knowing that 8 out of the 10 seeds will not germinate, blossom, grow, and produce fruit, which is the rewards.
Yeah, exactly. And you need to arm yourself. Everybody needs to arm themselves with knowing that those ratios exist, right? Because if you're not present to that, then you can fall victim to somebody pointing out the one failure that you have or the two. But if you're not armed with, hey, dude, yeah, you think that was just one failure? No, I failed these 500 other times over here. But guess what? I got these 3 things right. And that's why I was able to get this reward. But if you're not paying attention to that math and you're not actually doing the arithmetic yourself, then you will very likely be able to be pulled back into that dark playground like we talked about before.
God damn. So what's some of the pruning that you have to do? I mean, I talked about my soccer.
Yeah, good question. So I think, so actually to that last piece, what in our company, it's very fascinating. We've made a ton of progress, like an enormous amount of progress over the last many years, but specifically over the last like year-ish. And I have done a bad job of highlighting a lot of those results to the team, to where on occasion, a couple people or at least one person on the team will be like, oh yeah, like why are we not ever getting these things done? And that's not their fault. It's my fault, because I need to be marketing the results to the team as well, like capturing our wins. And actually Kyle's helping me with that right now. But so I don't know if it's a pruning situation, but it's more of like, I need to be doing this thing so that the rest of the team recognizes the progress. But I don't want to duck your question. So pruning. Man, I am going to try to find a legitimate answer for you. My honest to God answer first.
I don't need to prune anything. Is that what I'm
pretty bare bones. Do you know what I mean?
So for me, it's like kind of YouTube comedy and just getting off my phone in general. Like, I think I need to put my phone in some kind of like Houdini box with like 20 different locks. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the kind of delegating I was talking about, where I was just kind of like, or you know what? From the business book that we're reading, that we're going to resume next week, the E-Myth Revisited. When delegating turns into abdicating.
Yeah.
Right. So if I can be honest with myself, it's not the delegating that I've been doing, but it's the abdicating that I need to stop. And and then the planting I have to do is better exercise, sales, calls, and better Instagram, and really scripting, I think, is the first. I need to really work on my scripting, because that is so, like, the hours I put into scripting don't get converted into rewards right away, right? That's just kind of like building the foundation. And so I think that's some of the pruning and planting I have to do over the next week.
Gotcha. And I know an answer. I know the answer for me. Snacking. I need to stop snacking. Like, that's the pruning that I could do.
Yeah, same.
I just measured it at 9.
Not today. I'm not going to start today.
Yeah. I measured at 9.5% body fat, and this is not some sort of humble brag. My goal is to get in the 6s. I am absolutely certain that the only reason I'm not in the 6s is because of snacking. And again, like, for those listening, please don't. That is not. I promise you, it's not some sort of humble brag. Like, oh, like, you talking about 9.5, but like. It doesn't matter. It would have been the same thing if I was 15% or 20%, right? Like, the delta of body fat percentage from where my personal goal is and where I'm at currently is literally due to one thing. It's the extra calories from, like, oh, before I'm, why am I eating calories 3 minutes before I go to bed? Right, like do you know what I mean?
Dude. Yeah, man. Feasting for me, it's like feasting before I go to bed, right?
Yeah.
Like, why am I? I don't know. Yeah, dude. And so, what do you have to plant then? In the absence of that, you're going to prune that away, and so, like. What are you going to do? Just kind of
a
like
picture of my ideal, right? Like, avatar, right? In the snack bin, bringing very present, like, hey, the choice that you're making is,
dude. I've got a picture of me like, what was it? When I was like that. I've got a picture of me when I was 192 pounds.
What do you know?
Dude, I hit 178 over the last little while. I'm back down to 175 or just under 175. So I've been weighing myself every day this week, and that helps, right? That daily
Absolutely
reminder,
100%.
And so I'm under 175. I want to get down to 170. Mm-hmm. And thank God. It's on.
And while they're looking at that picture, to answer Donovan, the book that we're reading is The E-Myth Revisited. Ray and I, if anybody wants to join in, it's a phenomenal business book, like absolutely phenomenal business book on how to build a company. To answer your question, Ray, that's what I have to do.
Actually, the author of the E-Myth, he talks about having to burn it down as well.
Yep.
Right. Have to burn down the old business where you are the technician, trying to also be ignoring your manager and your entrepreneur role. You have to burn it all down and start again.
And I wonder if there's an element there, maybe final piece of this here is, do you have to prune the old identity? Do you have to burn down the identity to you?
You absolutely
yourself and the others, the stakeholders around you. Like, hey, I'm no longer this way.
I absolutely do have to do that, dude.
Yeah.
I absolutely do have to do that. And and quitting drinking and drugging all those years ago was part of it for me, right? Where I have to remind myself that I'm no longer the life of the party, the wild man, the clown. Because not drugging and not drinking for all these years is I am the sober one. I am like I'm always available to be a designated driver. And I think I need to lean more into that, right?
Yeah.
Dependable, reliable, predictable, gets things done. And build up that identity. I think
Are there any direct conversations you have to have around it?
Yeah. I mean, the direct conversation has to be with myself, first of all, that I am this guy. I can do this. Like, I don't have to transition into something else. I am this, right. The identity is I am this, right? Not that I want to be this. Right. The identity is that I am this. So I think I have to build that into my scorecard, maybe in the meditation component, where it's like, and we like, yeah, like I am successful. I am dependable. I am reliable. I do follow through, right? Like those kind of like mantras. I think that is in the few remaining seconds we have. Yeah, I think that is like that's huge. That's where you start.
And for what comes up for me for this last piece here is like, and giving yourself the credit for the doing part. I am this because I do this, or I am this because, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. I have self-esteem because I do esteemable acts.
Right.
Right. I am, people depend on me because I am dependable.
Yep. Love it.
So it's like identity plus action.
Well, it was nice to have this one-on-one with you, because I know normally you've got, 4 or 5 dudes up here. So yeah, thank you for participating in all that. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I needed this, man. I love you, man. I'll talk to you on Monday.
Love you too, brother. All right, pal. Later, buddy.